Hello?
あ、ジョーさんついに来ましたね。
Yoko Taro? What in God's name are you doing in my apartment?
それはね、ステラーブレードをおすすめしに来たんですよ。
Oh, yeah, I guess I thought about playing that, but I don't know, I guess I just lost interest
絶
over
対にやってみるべきですよ、ジョーさん。ニーアオートマタが大好きなのは知ってますよ。
Oh, okay, Mr. Taro. You've convinced me.
素晴らしい。ところで少しの間ここに泊めてもらってもいいですか？
Well, I don't know if we really have the accommodations for that. Oh my god. Yeah, no, you're welcome here anytime. Stellar Blade first caught my attention in 2021 when it was shown at a PlayStation showcase as Project Eve. When I saw the trailer, I thought, this looks really horny, but it also looks kinda sick. And that was kind of it for a while. I popped it into my list of things to play and checked on it very occasionally. Eventually, the release date rolled around and I kind of let it pass me by. Then there was talk of a PC port along with the release of a collab with my favorite game, and then I saw some gameplay online and I just couldn't help myself. So I bought it on PS5 despite the stark black voids on either side of my ultra-wide monitor. I will say, when starting this game, that is to say playing the demo, I thought about Lies of P quite a bit. A Souls-like game from an unknown Korean studio, unknown to me at least, which early on shows a nearly derailed suspended tram and immediately thereafter shows a tooltip talking about the groggy status on enemies. Then there are the enemy attacks that flash a special color and require you to do a specific action to avoid them. This mental comparison faded pretty quickly though. To me, Stellar Blade does a pretty good job of distinguishing itself from any of the things that one may compare it to. There are still very clear signs of inspiration. Hell, they literally used sound effects from NieR Automata. But I genuinely think this game has some things to offer that you just can't quite get anywhere else. Now, I should probably address the elephant in the room. I think the clearest line of inspiration for Stellar Blade comes from NieR Automata. From the general aesthetic and the plot to the appreciation of the female form, shall we say. Stellar Blade is perhaps more flagrant in its titillation, but I guess it was at least upfront with its intentions. Even the very first reveal trailer puts the cheeks out there pretty prominently. And look, this is all well and good. I'm not against this kind of thing, but it's not really why I'm here. I mean, there's porn on the internet. All that is to say, the game is very horny, but it does give you some nice options for customizing your character, some of which are not so butt-centric. I'm a sucker for character customization, so hunting down nanosuits was a great carrot on a stick for me, but luckily there were even more incentives to keep me going. If there's one thing that hooked me in this game and kept me playing and playing and playing until the credits rolled, it's the combat. I made an offhand comment about Stellar Blade being a Souls-like earlier, and while it certainly does borrow some of the hallmarks, I feel like it differs in enough ways to fall outside of that category. There's the little things like not really losing anything that you then have to go pick up after dying, but big picture, I think that Stellar Blade kind of straddles the line between a Souls-like and a character action game. The Souls games often offer very basic movesets, sometimes supplemented with stylish weapon skills or spells. Elden Ring in particular can be pretty flashy, but generally your moveset is more rudimentary and the combat is more about picking your moments to attack. Character action games put more emphasis on style, and also tend to have high skill ceilings. Players of these games can get very technical and precise about the wide range of moves offered in these games. I am by no means a pro gamer in this field, I just like pretty colors, flippy dippies, and crazy anime shit. And Stellar Blade offers all those things. Now, it may not scratch the itch of a Devil May Cry or a Bayonetta for the high-level stuff, but not everything has to. There's a lot to chew on with the combat in this game. Usually when I play a game with a focus on combat like this, I find myself in one of two mindsets. I either find myself wishing there was a bigger variety of moves for me to mix things up, or I have a great selection of moves to use, but I don't have the brain capacity to remember all of them. I much prefer to have the second problem. Stellar Blade falls into that latter category. You've got a decent assortment of basic combos with the ability to charge and enhance the final attack for many combos, perfect parries, perfect dodges, both of which have a couple special combos to follow up with, a rapid dashing attack which can be followed up with a couple different attacks, and some context-sensitive moves to counteract the more dangerous attacks that can be thrown at you. Then there are the beta moves which expend this beta energy meter but provide a little more oomph when you're in a pinch. Then there are burst moves for when an enemy just makes you say, actually, fuck you. Let's just say there were a few enemies that I would frequently use burst moves on. In addition to all that, there's a sort of overdrive mode that basically acts as a temporary get out of jail free card. I was initially very excited by this because this mode gives you an angel wing which then acts as your shield to block and deflect attacks, which is conceptually sick. Unfortunately, there's a lot of visual noise going on in this mode and you're more or less invulnerable to damage, so there's no reason to block, and I was spamming moves so much I rarely stopped to notice I even had the damn wing. Point is, there's a good variety of moves to pound your adversaries into submission. As for the enemies themselves, developer ShiftUp does a decent job of providing variety there too. Even having done almost every major side quest in the game, there were only a small handful of enemies that I got tired of or annoyed by. But beyond standard enemies wandering the various levels, there are of course boss fights, and I found these to be a highlight of the game. A few of them proved to be a little frustrating, but most provided at least some challenge and enjoyment, and some of them really made an impression. Boss fights like Raven and Belial were a great combination of testing my skills and providing dazzling spectacle. I mean, you can't tell me this ain't cool. The Belial fight in particular got a big assist from the hypertube in the orbital elevator. This hypertube gameplay had a lot of promise, and outside of this section and a smaller optional one in the desert, this mechanic was barely present, and I would have really liked to see more of it in the game. Maybe if there's DLC or a sequel, they could work more of this in. Something else that I think could have used work is the movement and momentum. I really wasn't a fan of the way Eve comes to a sudden and complete stop anytime you start to attack. It just feels weirdly rigid. Same goes for this jumping attack. It just feels like it should have more range, or maybe just a different animation? Even the exploration felt kind of stunted until I unlocked the double jump. I felt like something was missing up to that point, but things did improve after I unlocked it. But ShiftUp generally did a good job with its gameplay pacing, and one of the other mechanics they threw in to change things up was introducing these semi-survival horror shooting sections in these underground complexes. These sections probably wouldn't hold up well if they spanned the whole game, but as a temporary mechanic, it's a nice change of pace. Speaking more generally about the game's progression, there's quite a bit to contend with. To me, it's very reminiscent of the Final Fantasy VII Remake games. There's a pretty sizable collection of side quests you can take on, though I'd be hard-pressed to point out a single one that really made a strong impression. A lot of them involve going to a place, fighting some enemies, and picking up a thing. Now, I'm not too bothered by this as the combat is generally very fun, but there's definitely room for improvement. The characters you interact with are flatter than a cutting board, and the scenarios themselves are standard fare.
If you terrify the scavengers at the market, they'll tell you where it is.
Terrify them?
Yes.
There are some side quests that the devs clearly viewed as more substantial, but even these don't do much to move the needle. Alas, poor Yoko. Yeah, this is too big. The same is more or less true for the main storyline. The actors' performances range from average to underwhelming. They get the job done, but that's about it. And the script isn't picking up the slack. As I said, this game is blatantly inspired by the NieR games, and this whole plotline and setting kinda just feels like a half-assed attempt to make something like those games. There's a twist reveal about halfway through the game that didn't surprise me in the slightest, because it's basically ripped from NieR Replicant. And setting aside whether it's original or not, the game just doesn't put forth the effort to actually give anything weight. I could not bring myself to care in the slightest what was happening to Eve, or any of the other characters for that matter, because everything is just so bog standard. The only thing that the devs were able to achieve on an emotional level was spectacle. And to be fair, there were some pretty spectacular moments. But I digress. Part of what makes the game so compelling to play was the exploration. The game is largely comprised of linear zones with branching pathways, along with 2 decently sized open world areas. In both cases, it's very beneficial to be thorough in your exploration. Fighting enemies gets you experience both in terms of collecting points and getting practice on the controller. There are plenty of chests with upgrade materials, stat boosting gear, and new outfits. There are also a bunch of text notes to be found, but once again, these don't do much to paint a very interesting picture of the world. But exploring the world and finding all these things was critical for me in unlocking new abilities and generally making a stronger character, so I was more than happy to do it. There's also this secret gauge that builds up when you do certain activities in the world. You're given basically no information on it, but apparently when it fills up, you unlock a whole extra section of gameplay before the final stretch, so keep an eye out for that. Anyway, Stellar Blade incentivizes all this exploration and material collection through various upgrades. There are plenty of combat moves and passive buffs to acquire through the skill tree. Upgrades to your tumbler, i.e. your health potion, there's an upgrade tree for your pod, I mean your drone, and then there are exospine and gear slots within which you can place a whole variety of boons to alter your playstyle. You can favor a more high stakes build that deals more damage but also takes more damage, or you could go more defensive and maybe beef up your beta or burst abilities. And the game keeps giving even after you've reached the credits. There's a new game plus with new, improved upgrades, a few new beta moves, and new outfits. Now, most of them are palette swaps, but they're pretty good palette swaps, and there are already a whole bunch of outfits anyway. There's also a boss rush mode, allowing you to fight any boss you like at your leisure, assuming you've already fought them before. Overall, I was pretty impressed with Stellar Blade in some ways and pretty underwhelmed in others. The combat's pretty flashy and satisfying, if a little more rigid than I would like at times. There are also some very creative, if horny, outfits, and the environments are all interesting enough. The narrative and the world building just don't cut it though. Very flat, not exactly inspiring stuff. I do think the game is worth checking out for the gameplay and combat alone. Shift Up have created a combat system that's very enjoyable to play, and even if the world surrounding it doesn't do much to support it, it can pretty much stand on its own.
女の子大好きなんです。
Thanks everybody for watching. Please remember to give this a thumbs up if you liked it, and subscribe if you want to see more. And if you want to support me directly, there's always Patreon. Patreon members get special bonuses like behind the scenes videos where I talk about the making of some of my reviews, and early access to videos where I talk about what games I've been playing. But that's enough for me. I'll catch you in the next one. Bye bye!